නවපෑ සබන් සහ ක්‍රීම් ජාත්‍යන්තර ළමා රෝග පිළිබඳ විශේෂඥයන් විසින් සායනිකව තහවුරු කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Saturday, the 11th of February 2023. Needs of the nation. President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that the investments from the diaspora and the corporates are needed by the country to go forward. Rebound. Worker remittances in January surpassed 150 billion rupees compared to 52.2 billion rupees earned in the same month last year.
උසස් පෙළට පසු කොලිෆයි වෙමු ඉහළට යමු ජය අරගමු ප්‍රොමෝෂන් එකට ඊළඟ දාගත්තොත් ඩිග්‍රිය ගොඩ
ජාතික කළමනාකරණ ආයතනය NIPM වෙතින් රාජ්‍ය වගකීම සහ ලෝපිළිගත් උපාධියක් තරුණ ඔබට Be smart, be qualified, be recognized with NIPM ජාතික වැවිලි සරසවිය.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In a top story for tonight, President Ranil Wickremesinghe underscored the need for diaspora engagement for the development of the northern province. While expressing commitment to the devolution of power as a solution to the northern issue, President Wickremesinghe pointed out that funds from not only international organizations but also the diaspora and corporates are needed if the country needs to move forward. The Indian Cultural Centre that was built with funding from the Indian government was vested with the public this morning under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
We appreciate the aid given by the Indian government to Sri Lanka during the crisis. We cannot separate the cultures of both our countries. India is one side of a coin while Sri Lanka is the other. We need to protect this culture and develop it. Therefore, we thank the Indian government for helping to build this institution. We need to embark on a new journey and all Sri Lankans need to unite in this journey. Our policy is reconciliation, development and culture.
Later in the day, President Ranil Wickremesinghe also met with the leaders of the northern province and academics to discuss the issues faced by the northern communities. During the discussion, the president pointed out to plans that are in the pipeline to develop the northern province.
Under the reconciliation program, we have spoken about maximum devolution of power. If we are going forward, we need investments from the diaspora and other corporates apart from the usual foreign investments. We are first looking at innovating the agricultural sector. We must look at harvesting at least 6 metric tons of paddy from about 1 acre of farmland available from Kilinochchi to Kumana to Udawalawe. When the paddy harvest increases in these areas, we will be able to use other lands to grow other export crops. The future lies with green ammonia and green hydrogen. A majority of this is produced in the north and this will develop the northern economy. Reconciliation alone will not solve the problems of the north. We will rid the north of the drug menace that is prevalent in the region. The provinces must work with the government to develop the areas. Let's compete to develop the provinces. With competition, it is the country that will develop.
The former Sri Lankan representative of the International Monetary Fund, Dr. Nadimul Haq, is of the view that Sri Lanka should not expect the world to bail out the country from massive indebtedness brought on by financial mismanagement and an excessive handout culture. Dr. Nadimul Haq, joining at Hyde Park with Indiva Riyamawatta on AdaDerana 24, said Sri Lanka should now take policy correctiveness measures while working on debt restructuring as a prerequisite for a $2.9 billion IMF program. Also joining the program, economist Dr. Tissa Jayavira pointed out that authorities must work towards reversing wastage and bring about financial and administrative controls to the state sector in order to compete with the private sector.
How do we, moving forward, look at setting up non-debt creating ventures as a long-term sustainable solution to the country?
We wanted independence, we gained independence. Independence comes with some responsibility, which unfortunately we haven't really shouldered. And we should accept that unfortunately our countries, especially my country, has been very badly run. We are still having a political battle on who wants to be king. So I think that's very sad that we have not even figured out a system of governance that we can be happy with. At the same time, when you talk about the IMF is a doctor. You don't rely on your health to a doctor. Go to a doctor when you're sick, but you want to avoid going to a doctor. So you live well, you eat well, you exercise, you do all the things you need to do because you want to stay healthy. Unfortunately, in my country, we do everything to get sick. And then when we get sick, we think that the world owes us something. The world will forgive our debt or the world will come to our rescue. I think this is not an attitude for independent people. If we're independent, we must shoulder our responsibility. It's our job to make our country work. This handout economy has to go. Handouts were a part of the feudal system and we are adopting a feudal system. We have to get to the modern capitalist system. I don't like social marketing in terms like that. My former Prime Minister Imran Khan used to say Rasat Medina too. I don't like that. I think quite frankly, let's accept the fact that modernity requires an open economy, open competitive economy, an imaginative economy, an idea-led economy, and we have to move there. Now, yes, of course, nobody's saying that we should be harsh and not sensitive to the needs of the disadvantaged. Of course, we should be sensitive to them. But let's not confuse that with the fact that the country as a whole has to compete and has to wake up.
The transition to a social market economy that the President was talking about, is this realizable within the context of the policies and the framework that the Sri Lankan economy operates?
Okay, based on the social market economy, we should have a free market economy where the government is in competition with the private sector. Most of the ministries don't publish their accounts. They just take the money and spend on something. And then what have they spent it on? 40% is lost somewhere. 60% has gone into the project. So where has this 40% gone? Into automobiles, into travel, into various things like that, where we have to have controls, good FR, AR. That's what the British taught us. Financial and administrative regulations, those are gone. They are scrapped by current public officials. They don't know. And they are not educated. Though they have a degree, this country was run by public officials during that time who didn't have a science degree. But they knew how to manage their government departments. But now we take people with qualifications, with degrees from various countries, but they don't know their FR and AR.
Now, the Airport and Aviation Services Limited says it has launched investigations into a recent incident at the Katunaika Airport where officials had failed to take action against a businessman carrying 50 rounds of ammunition via the BIA. The individual in question had travelled to Singapore on the 29th of January via the BIA.
It is reported that a 44-year-old businessman was arrested by security officials at the Bandaranaike International Airport in Katunaika on the 29th of January when he was found to be carrying 50 rounds of 9mm ammunition in his possession. The passenger was due to travel to Singapore. However, it is reported that upon producing a license for the ammunition, airport officials released the businessman, allowing him to travel overseas. But the individual had handed over the ammunition to his driver before departing. As per security officials, a license allows possession of only a maximum of 10 rounds of ammunition. It is reported that the Air Force officers with information of the incident later informed higher authorities, and the Air Force commander was briefed of the incident at the Security Council meeting held recently. Meanwhile, Chairman of Airport and Aviation Services, retired Major General G.A. Chandrasiri, stated that an internal investigation is underway into the incident. Furthermore, the security forces claim that the motive of the businessman attempting to carry the ammunition has not been uncovered yet due to the failure of the airport security in notifying relevant authorities and police at the time of the incident. Director General and CEO of the Civil Aviation Authority, P.A. Jayakantha, meanwhile states that the authority has no connection with the incident.
Now, in the meantime, Professor G.L. Piri states that all public officials who ingratiate themselves to the present government and abet the efforts to delay elections must keep in mind the recent rulings given by the Supreme Court on the Easter Sunday case. He made these remarks at a media briefing in Colombo today.
Neither in this country nor in any other democratic country in the recent past has there been such a systematic effort on the part of the executive branch of government to thwart the holding of a democratic election, public officials who like to score brownie points and ingratiate themselves with a government which will last a few more months, kindly remember that in terms of the judgment that was handed down unanimously by 7 judges of the Supreme Court in the Easter Sunday case, to do that, you must accept personal liability, which means the payment of compensation. But in some cases, compensation will not suffice. You will go to jail. This is not a threat. Mr. Neil Bandara Hapuhinna already has a case on his hands. Yesterday, the Elections Commission, for the second time, gave a solemn undertaking to the Supreme Court that they are firmly resolved to hold this election. But in order to do so, as a practical matter, financial resources are required. It is now the compulsory obligation of the Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Mahinda Siriwardena, to make those resources available to the Elections Commission. If he fails, neglects, or refuses to do so, he is clearly violating Article 104 of the Constitution and a variety of other laws. And he must accept personal responsibility for his failure to comply with the paramount law of the land. Why is it that the government went to these extraordinary lengths? Because they are well aware that although this is in form a local government election, actually the results of this election carry consequences which extend far beyond the local government domain. This is an opportunity for the people of our country to pass judgment on the performance of this government. There will be a huge cry in the country at large for the dissolution of this obsolete parliament.
Now, leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, claims that despite the people's expectations that the country's problems would be solved by the incumbent president, the reality has been otherwise. He said this addressing a public rally in Maharagama yesterday. Another public rally was organized by the Samagi Janabalawegi in Maharagama yesterday.
Garu Shresthaadhikarane මේ රටේ ජනතාවගේ ඡන්ද අයිතිය, ජනතා අයිතිය, ජනතා පරමාධිපත්‍ය රැකගත්තු ඓතිහාසික දවසක් බවට අද පත් වෙලා හමාරයි. සමහරෙක් කිව්වනේ වර්තමාන ජනාධිපතිතුමාට ඉතාමත්ම හොඳ ජාත්‍යන්තර සමබරතා තියෙනවා. එයා ජනාධිපති වුණොත් රටේ ප්‍රශ්න ටික ඔක්කොම හරි. වැඩේ ගොඩ අතේ ඩොලර් බිලියන 4ක් තියාගෙන තමයි මේ මිනිස්සයා ජනාධිපති වෙන්නේ කියලා. දැන් ඊයේ පෙරේද මොනවද අපිට ආරංචි වෙන්නේ? ජපානයේ කීර්තිමත් ව්‍යාපාරික ආයතනයක් මිත්සුබිසි කෝපරේෂන් එක අපේ රටෙන් ඒ කරපු ආයෝජනය හකුලාගෙන යනවා.
The leader of the Jatika Janabalawegi, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, states that the country today needs a government which clearly establishes the rule of law. He made these remarks at an event held in Maharagama earlier today.
එනං අද අපේ රට අවශ්‍ය මොකද්ද? නීතියේ විධානය ආධිපත්‍ය නිසි පරිදි තහවුරු කරන රාජ්‍යයක් අවශ්‍යයි. අපි ඔබට සහතිකයක් දෙනවා. අන්න ඒ රට අපි ගොඩ නගනවා. මේ මහ පොළොව ගංගා පිරෙන්න තරම් ලේ ගලලා තිබෙනවා. මොකද්ද අපිට ඇති වී තිබෙන ප්‍රතිඵලය? මේ කිසිවක් මෙතන ඉන්න ජෙනරාල් වරයෙක්ගේ කැමැත්ත නෙවෙයි. මේ කිසිවක් මෙතන ඉන්න සාමාන්‍ය සොල්දාදුවෙකුගේ කැමැත්ත නෙවෙයි. හමුදාවට බැඳෙන්නේ යුද්ධ කරන්න නෙවෙයි. හැබැයි මොකක්ද සිදු වී තිබෙන්නේ? අපේ රටේ දේශපාලනය අපි අතර ගැටුම් විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක් නිර්මාණය කරා. ඒක ඔවුන්ගේ දේශපාලනය. මේ දේශපාලකයන්ට අවශ්‍ය වී තිබුණා තමන්ගේ පැවැත්ම ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් ජාතිවාදී යුද්ධ මත කේන්ද්‍ර කරගත්තා. මේ යුද්ධය, මේ ගැටුම්, මේ ජාතිවාදය මේ පාලකයන්ගේ දේශපාලන පාපන්දුව. අපි අද ඒ පාපන්දුව ඉවත් කරන්න සූදානම් වෙන්නේ නැත්නම් වළක්වන්න බැරි විදිහටම අපේ දරුවන්ගේ පරම්පරාව නැවත යුද්ධ කරගන්නවා. මේ ඛේදවාචකයේ පේන මේ යුගයේ මේ පරම්පරාවේ මිනිසුන්ගේ කාර්යභාරය තමයි මේ ඛේදවාචකයේ මේ රාජ්‍ය මුදවා ගැනීම. අන්නේ මුදවා ගැනීමේ පංගුකරුවෙක් කොටස්කරුවෙක් විතරයි පෞද්ගලික ගත්තොත් මම. කුඩා කොටසක් මම ඉටු කරනවා. එක සහතිකයක් දෙන්න. ඔබ අප කරේ තබන විශ්වාසය අබමල් රොණකින්වත් හානි නොකරන බවට අපි ඔබට සහතිකයක් දෙන්න.
Welcome back. Now, minor tremor of magnitude 2.3 on the Richter scale was reported in Vellavaya earlier today. Last afternoon, 2 minor tremors of magnitude 3 and 3.5 were felt in the areas of Buttala, Vellavaya, Komukkana, Okkampitiya and several other areas in the Monoragala district. The NBRO, allaying the fears about the threat of the danger, mentioned that tremors are frequent in the area stretching from Buttala to Lunugambera. Meanwhile, a senior geologist of the Geological Bureau, Taranga Munasinghe, stated that 2 teams of the Bureau were dispatched to the aforementioned areas to look into the minor tremors. Speaking in this regard, Professor Atula Senaratne, a senior professor of geology at the University of Peradeniya, said that seismic activity of the Carlsberg Ridge at the bottom of the Indian Ocean is suspected to have caused the tremors felt yesterday. However, according to the National Building Research Organization, this minor tremor poses no danger, and they further urge the public to not have any undue fears. Now in your business news, the Sri Lankan rupee has slightly appreciated against the Indian rupee and the US dollar so far during the year, but depreciated against other major currencies, including the Japanese yen and the euro. Meanwhile, according to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, gross official reserves stood at $21.2 billion as at the end of January 2023.
As per the weekly economic indicators of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for the week ending February 10th, gross official reserves were provisionally estimated at $2.12 billion as at the end of January 2023, which included the People's Bank of China's swap equivalent to around $1.4 billion, of which usage is subject to conditions. In the monetary sector, reserve money decreased compared to the previous week, mainly due to the decrease in deposits held by commercial banks with the central bank. The total outstanding market liquidity was a deficit of 168.934 billion rupees by yesterday, compared to a deficit of 297.619 billion rupees by the end of last week. Elaborating on the external sector, the central bank pointed out that so far during the year, the Sri Lankan rupee appreciated against the US dollar by 0.3% and appreciated 0.1% against the Indian rupee. However, given the cross-currency exchange rate movements, the Sri Lankan rupee depreciated against the Japanese yen by 0.5%, the euro by 0.4%, and the pound sterling by 0.2%. Meanwhile, according to provisional estimates, earnings from tourism stood at 58.7 billion rupees in January of 2023 compared to 30.6 billion rupees during the same period in 2022. According to CBSL data, workers' remittances also saw a drastic increase, rising to 158.6 billion rupees in January compared to just 52.2 billion rupees in the same month of 2022. The report highlighted that Sri Lanka's index of industrial production for 2022 showed a decline of 25.3%. The other metallic mineral products showed the most drastic decline, with the category slipping 39.9%. The chemicals and chemical products saw a decline of 36.3%, while the industry of rubber and plastic products saw the industrial production index dive 34%. On unemployment, the central bank highlighted that while the metric fell to 4.6% in the second quarter of 2022 from the annual rate of 5.1% in 2021, unemployment rose back to 5% in the third quarter of 2022. On the Colombo Bourse, the all-share price index decreased 2.62% to 8,938.48 points, and the more liquid S&P Sri Lanka 20 index decreased 3.74% to 2,756.41 points by February 10th compared to the index values of last week.
And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Until then, tune into our social media pages to stay abreast of the latest news. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.